Hey, this is Steve, and you are listening to the Falafel House Fantasy Football Podcast, a part of the BS Podcast Network. Enjoy the show.
In a world of ordinary fantasy football podcasts, ordinary guys rise up to bring you extraordinary analysis and entertainment. This is the Falafel House Fantasy Football Podcast with your hosts Kevin Cotillo, Sal Lito, and Stephen Marcus.
It feels like the first time. Feels like the very first time. It feels like the first time. It feels like the very first time. I have waited a lifetime.
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Today is Thursday. It is September 28th, and this is the Falafel House Fantasy Football Podcast. I am your host, Kevin Cotillo, and we got a full house tonight. We are all back in town. I have with me Sal Lito. What's going on, Sal?
Hey, what's up, buddies?
You know, I feel like I have to introduce you first now, Sal, because I think you and I have bonded a little bit with Steve being away a few times here. I think we've turned a corner. We get along a little bit better now, and maybe now.
Pretty sure you
Oh,
have a false sense of security.
Yeah, that's not what you said on Tuesday, Kevin. All right?
What?
Wait,
When you were
What
here
happened?
on the podcast with just me.
oh yeah, that's right. Sorry.
Yeah.
Hey, Steve. Steve Marcus is here. How's it going, Steve?
Yeah, I heard all of that.
Oh, I thought you were usually you can't hear us till I bring you in.
No, usually
right?
I just stop listening and tune out when you start talking.
Oh,
So,
yeah. As it turns out, we all have a problem with not listening to each other on this podcast. It seems to be a common trend here. We may want to work on that going forward.
I'll think about it.
I'm good.
All right, good,
That's a
cool.
solid
We will
no
continue
from Sal.
on then. That is a solid no. He was straight no.
Yep.
So we are watching the Packers and the Bears play right now as we speak. And Ty Montgomery has apparently suffered a punctured lung, according to Dr. Steve.
That is not
So-
a fact.
That's not true.
But he did leave with a chest injury. By the time you hear this podcast, hopefully there'll be more information available.
That is very true. Yes, he did leave with a chest injury. He is questionable return right now as it stands in the first quarter. So, but Aaron Rodgers does look like he's going to be on fire tonight. He already has one touchdown. So we will get into all of the other games coming up for the weekend and get you prepped.
Don't
But,
forget about Mike Glennon. He has one fumble on the night already. We're
Wow.
seven minutes into this game.
Do you think
Raise your hand if you started Mike Glennon.
Mike Glennon will have more or less turnovers than Aaron Rodgers has touchdowns?
Oh, that's
I'll
interesting.
predict 4 touchdowns for Rodgers. And as I'm saying that, he just threw his second. And I'll predict 3 turnovers for Mr. Glennon. In fact, I'm going to predict that we might see Trubisky in his second half of this game.
Woo! Interesting. Wow.
Wow, Trubisky this game, huh? All right, well, this will all be irrelevant by the time you are all listening to it. So let's continue on. We are going to, as I said, get through every single game. And as we typically do, we are going to allow Steve to take us through them.
Yeah, because evidently I'm the only one that has any sense of time while we are doing this podcast. So
Not only that, but you don't usually miss games. So you
That's
know,
right. That's right.
There's that.
I'm efficient.
Does anybody really know what time it is? Does
Please
anybody
start.
really
Yeah, it's time to
care?
stop. It's time
Please
to
start.
stop
Please
with that
start this.
dream. With that dream of the singing.
You guys don't like Chicago?
Hey, listen, before we get into all the games, I do want to ask you guys a question because I've been getting a lot of crap today because of all the moves that I made in leagues. Steve and I talked about this a little earlier in the week. Week 4 is upon us. I know that Sal's Sink or Swim came out today, and you talked about getting towards the quarter pole and really being into the season and getting a feel for these defenses and knowing your own players and what they're going to do. Sal, you and I talked about this last week as well. Are you bailing on anything yet? Are you ready to pack it in?
No, there's really no one I'm in particular bailing on yet. I heard you guys discuss Adrian Peterson on the episode that I missed on Tuesday. And
he's terrible?
I'm going to hold him. I'm going to hold him wherever he's not terrible. He hasn't.
Well,
got an
he needs to be held right now.
I'm going
to
to hold him.
He's very upset.
I will
Hold me.
I would hold him if it would be kind of awkward because he's bulky.
He's a big guy.
But I'm going to hold on to him on my rosters because there's always a possibility that an injury could happen, and I want to be there with the new starting running back when that happens. But I'm also holding out hope that he complains enough that they move him or release him, and he ends up with a team that might actually use him.
Where would you want him to go?
The Giants.
Why?
Yeah, that would be a good fit.
No, it wouldn't.
I know
They
that
can't
their
block
offensive line is
anybody.
not. I know that their offensive line is not good, but he would at least get a ton of playing time there.
Why not Arizona?
That's a good fit too.
Not a bit. It's why you got to be all like nasty about this. Maybe I didn't think of Arizona first. Like, hey, why not Arizona? Just throw
Yeah,
it
you
out
know what?
there.
I'm going to give the win to Steve on this one, and we're going to start going through the games.
Booyah.
All right, go ahead, Steve.
I win the podcast. All right. We're going to start with the early Sunday morning game, London. Another game in London. Hopefully, we don't see the blowout we saw this week with Jacksonville, Baltimore. We've got the New Orleans Saints at the Miami Dolphins. So, do you think the Dolphins are going to show up for this one, Sal, after they laid the stinker against the Jets last week? What are you expecting out of the Dolphins? Jay Cutler, Jay Ajayi, Jarvis Landry, he's kind of who he is. So what do you think? Do you think they have a chance in this one?
I do, because New Orleans, they always bring that vaunted defense with them wherever they go. So anybody playing against the Saints has an opportunity to get good fantasy points. Now, I do have Jay Ajayi on my swim list this week, and Kevin pointed out that he's not in on him this week. And I'm going to tell you, he is going back to London, which is where he was born. But the main reason I believe he's going to get a ton of touches is they want to keep the ball out of the quarterback's hands. And when I say the quarterback's hand, I mean both Drew Brees and Jay Cutler. They don't want the ball in either one of those quarterback hands in that game because Jay Cutler is terrible. So, yes, I do believe that Miami will score some points. I think New Orleans will probably win the game, but I think that you can get your Dolphin players in your lineups.
So I know that Jay Ajayi is obviously going back home, and that's great. It's a nice little narrative. But he looked absolutely awful last week. 11 carries for 16 yards. That's a 1.45 yards per attempt average. He's the type of guy that either has a big game or a bust game, and we don't typically see a lot from London when we're talking about these guys. I know that Jacksonville put up, 44 points or whatever it was last week, but that was mostly defensive. And then somehow Blake Bortles, throws 4 touchdowns. But I think this is a tough game for them. I don't think that this defense, obviously New Orleans defense is nothing. They've given up a ton, but the time change, the weird schedule. You're talking about a game that's at a 9:30 a.m. game. Whether it's, obviously it's not 9:30 over there, but it's still 9:30 to them. And it's tough. It's tough to change your whole mode that way. So, look, I think it's gonna be a tough game. I am not terribly far out on Ajayi. I think I have him in the top 4. Or I am at 14. So. He's an RB2 for me this week, so I still think there's value. I don't see him up that high. That's all.
I don't think I necessarily disagree with that. I've got him a little bit higher. I think that
7.
Yeah. So I think that he, it's basically the difference between a touchdown. So if he gets into the end zone, he'll probably be on that higher end of that, and I think they'll get some yards out of him. For the Saints, I just want to say Kobe Fleener might be a good play for people. Miami, in only the 2 games that they've played so far this season, they've allowed 15 receptions to the tight end. And so he might be someone you might want to get into your lineup if you have someone else on your team, like maybe an Eric Ebron, who's been not very great so far this season. But we'll talk about him later. You guys have anything else to say about this one before we move on? I think it's kind of obvious. I think you're starting Drew Brees, Michael Thomas. You got to be happy with he's getting a little more involved in the offense each and every week. And Willie Snead, how about him before we go? Are you starting him first week back?
I have him in where it's necessary for me to use him, where I'm strapped for players. In other leagues where I can afford to keep him on the bench and let him come back slowly, I am. It does sound like they might work him back in slowly, which You can never believe coach speak and stuff like that. He could come back and have 2 touchdowns this week. But, if I don't need to put him in, I'm not putting him in.
I have him all the way down at wide receiver 51 in PPR this week. I just don't, first week back, coming off a suspension. I think Brandon Coleman's played pretty well and well enough to still be involved in the passing game there. So I'm not starting Snead if I have him. I'd probably wait another week on him, especially with the London game and all that. I will say the guy, one guy that I'm a little higher on than I typically am in this game is Devontae Parker. I know, Sal, you don't think they're Jay Cutler's going to throw the ball, they want Jay Cutler to throw the ball a ton, but I do think Parker's going to have a good game. Obviously, New Orleans secondary is terrible, so he's the one guy that I'm higher on than I typically am at wide receiver 25. Steve, you have him at wide receiver 20, so clearly you agree with me.
Yeah.
I love Parker, by the way. I was all in on him last week, and he salvaged the day with that last-second touchdown, literally last-second touchdown. But no, I think that it's very possible for the wide receivers to have good games and Cutler not to have a good game. It's between turnovers and just really Jay Cutlering it up. It's very possible.
You worried about the Saints,
the wide receivers?
Saints,
What?
doing a lot of intercepting the ball quite often. Do they do that?
No, I just worry about Cutler throwing it directly to them.
Yeah.
Wow.
All right. We are going to move on. Next up, we've got...
I think they're required to drop it.
What?
If that is the case. I think they're required by law to drop interceptions.
A lot of defensive players are. That's why they're on defense. That's what I hear everybody say every time any defender drops the ball. That's why they're on defense. It's annoying. All right, anyway, we're going to move on. Buffalo Bills traveling to Atlanta to face the Falcons. Buffalo, there was a surprising win over Denver, I think a lot of people thought. And then Atlanta, they escaped out of Detroit with the controversial touchdown by Golden Tate. Is there anybody you guys are really worried about in this game? I think you've got, LaShawn McCoy. He hasn't been great, but it's not somebody that you're actually going to bench. And then on the Atlanta side of the ball, you kind of have your usual suspects over there. So who are you not starting that you would typically start?
No one for me. Everyone's in this game. Even the Buffalo pass catchers get a little bit of an uptick in this one because I don't think Atlanta's defense is particularly good. I have Tyrod Taylor back in the top 12 this week because I think that he can throw the ball, and even more than that, I think he's going to be able to run the ball pretty successfully against Atlanta. I think all of the offense in this game is going to be all over the place. Buffalo's defense has played pretty well, but I don't think they're any match for the Atlanta offense and the way they can use all of their different pieces. So get them all in there.
I think it's a widely felt belief that Tyrod Taylor will be a top starting quarterback and running back, I guess, this week. I actually recommended to my son to start Tyrod Taylor over Derek Carr this week. He texted me today. Him and a friend of his were in lunch at school, and they were talking about it. And Carr is on my sync list, so I would get him in there. And this is a LaShawn McCoy get healthy, get right game. I mean, he's going up against the defense that gives up. We go over it all the time. A ton of receptions, yardage, and touchdowns to pass catching running back. So I expect McCoy to be heavily involved. Yeah, but that was Detroit. I mean, we're talking about Detroit. They don't have good running backs.
Falcons still giving up the 5th most fantasy points to running backs in the league right now. So, I mean, and that includes, 26 receptions for 220 yards and 2 touchdowns?
Yeah, they're still giving up a ton of yardage and receptions to pass catching backs. If you go back to last year, if you take 16 games and then 2 out of the 3 this year, I don't worry about the one where the putrid Detroit running game didn't get. Wow. You're pissing me off tonight, Mark.
Wow.
I'll tell you right now.
I feel like this episode's going to be cut pretty damn short. Let's just keep moving along here.
All right.
Oh, man.
I'll just say the Bills wide receivers on the season have totaled 17 receptions. So
yeah.
I'm not sure if it's going to be a good game for them, but I agree. Tyrod Taylor, LaShawn McCoy, those are the guys you want. And then everyone on the Atlanta offense, you get those guys in each and every week. So we will move on to the Pittsburgh Steelers at the Baltimore Ravens. I know Sal was pretty low on a few players in this game, so go ahead, Sal. Sink or swim. Who do you got on this game? Who do you like? Who don't you like?
I have Roethlisberger on the sink list. This is obviously it's a road game. Baltimore is going to be pretty pissed and angry after getting smacked around and embarrassed last week. We know coming into last week's game, they had 8 interceptions in the first 2 games. I expect Baltimore to get back on track and really bring the heat to Pittsburgh this week. I like Javoris Allen in this game. I have Javoris Allen on my swim list this week. I expect him to get 20-plus touches and be the focal point as far as running backs go in that offense. You don't have a whole lot going on with the wide receivers in Baltimore, and Pittsburgh's got a fairly good pass defense. So I think this is a big Javoris Allen game.
Kevin, I've got a question for you. Le'Veon Bell hasn't been exactly what everyone expected him to be this season. You might expect a little bit of a slow start since he held out most of training camp. But what do you think about him this game, knowing that the Ravens, they've only allowed 1 RB1 in any of their home games since the beginning of last season? They are tough against the run at home. Do you think this is a game where he might get solid again, or do you think we're going to have to wait one more week to see the Le'Veon Bell that everyone expects to see?
Yeah, no, I think this is the week you're going to see Le'Veon Bell. I think that, he's finally, this is the week I expect him to shake off all the rust from the holdout. I expect him to be a little bit more like himself. I understand Baltimore is a good defense, but Pittsburgh obviously plays them very difficult on a regular basis. We know this is going to be a smash mouth game. You guys will be shocked to know how far down the list I have Ben Roethlisberger this week. I have him at QB 25. I don't think they're going to be able to move the ball very well through the air, and I do think that they're just going to rely on Le'Veon Bell to do what he does. I could see him getting 30 carries in this and ending up with somewhere around 120 yards and possibly a touchdown or 2. So I think it's a big Le'Veon Bell game, and I think that this is the week you start to see Le'Veon Bell be himself.
Another thing that I see this particular matchup, and they play each other twice a year, and you tune in and it's like 9-6, or it's a field goal battle with these two teams. So to Kevin's point, to the point I made earlier, probably a big running game on both sides. Probably not as high scoring as you would hope. And be cautious when setting your lineups with these guys this week. And by the way, before we move forward, it's 2-2 in turnovers and the touchdowns tonight on this game, even though, again, by the time you see this, you will know that Mr. Trubisky is going to play tonight.
I will just say the total for this game on the in the Vegas books is 42 right now. So you're right; it's not projected to be a super high scoring game. Get your Justin Tuckers and your Chris Boswells in there. So that's it for that one. We'll move on to the other AFC North matchup. We've got the Cincinnati Bengals traveling to play the Cleveland Browns. Cincinnati looked much, much better last week against Green Bay. So you wonder if the change in OC, the offensive coordinator, if that's going to make a big difference for them. Kevin, we will start with you. Joe Mixon seemed to take over the backfield last week. Do you think this is the week that it is an absolute no-brainer? You can start him with some confidence?
No, and we've talked about this before. I mean, it was nice to see him get 18 carries last week or whatever it was, and really be used a little bit more in the offense. So, but I think I said it last week, and I'll say it again this week. I'm going to be a week late on Mixon rather than a week early, because I need to see that it's going to be consistent, and not only that, I need to see that it works. Right? The 18 carries are nice. I think I don't know, I forget what he had. I don't have it in front of me, 80 yards maybe, somewhere around along that line. But it still wasn't a big breakout game. And like I said, I fear that they may end up, dialing that back again next week, and you'll see an up and down kind of thing and not know when to start him. So, like I said, if they go and you give him that heavy volume again this week, then I will start to feel a lot more comfortable. But surprisingly, the Cleveland Browns actually aren't terrible against the run. 20th in the league as far as fantasy points given up to a running back. So, they've been able to stop the run a little bit better than people think. And we know that Cincinnati line is just terrible. They're so bad. So, I got to see it a little bit more before I can trust it. I will say this. I do think, and I believe Sal wrote this in his Sink or Swim as well, I think A.J. Green gets right in this one.
Yeah, I like it.
I had last week. Andy Dalton, AJ Green were my favorite stack in DFS, and they hooked up together last week, and AJ Green came back. This week, Dalton is on my swim list, and he's had good games against Cleveland. In his last 4 starts over the last 2 years, he's got 10 total touchdowns, 9 passing, and 1 rushing, and he's got 0 interceptions in that same time. So he always plays well in this matchup. I think that they got righted last week. I knew that they weren't as bad as they started. It doesn't mean that they're good. It doesn't mean they're a playoff team. But that offense has got weapons. Not all of them are healthy at this time, but it has weapons, and I expect them to be much better. And I think there's a decent amount of points put up on both sides of the ball in this game.
I will just say Cleveland is trailed for every offensive snap in the second half of their season this year. That is a statistic from Rich Rebar from Roto World. I just thought that was pretty impressive almost, that they have not led for a single snap in the second half. So, Sal, real quick before we move on, Isaiah Crowell, he was a pretty popular running back this season during the draft. He has not finished higher than RB29 yet this year. He is averaging 2.9 yards per carry. Do you think he turns it around? Do you think he is somebody that's just had a slow start, or are you starting to panic about him?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not panicking on him because I don't own him anywhere, because you guys know how I feel about him. But yeah, I think if you drafted him, you probably drafted him with a fairly high pick because his value was shooting through the roof by the time the season rolled around. And I think you should absolutely panic. I think 44 yards last week was his highest total in 3 weeks. Cincinnati is a middle-of-the-road team on stopping running backs. Actually, that is the incorrect page that is open in front of me. But Cincinnati's
actually very good, 27.
Very good at stopping running backs. So, yeah, I worry. I worry for sure that you didn't listen to me months ago and not draft him. I worry for your intelligence.
Oh, just you, huh? It's just you that said that?
Yeah.
Well,
Pretty sure.
I'm the needle mover here. We all know that.
Oh, that's right.
What you do on your own time is your own problem, all right? We're going to move on to the Rams and the Dallas.
Listen, wait. I'm sorry. Before we move on, just one other thing that I want to note. If you have a tough week with one of your quarterbacks or in a deeper league, I think DeShone Kizer is definitely a playable quarterback. I have him at quarterback 16, and I think that this could be a week for him. He could, you might see him run a little bit more, and you could see some volume in the passing game. Because I agree with Sal. I think it'll be a high scoring game. So sorry.
Oh, no problem. Sorry, I didn't ask if we had anything else to talk about before we moved on. My apologies.
That's all right.
Kevin. Especially with Sam Bradford already being ruled out. You might have, if you had Sam Bradford as your Andrew Luck backup, and now you're hurting real bad, Kizer might not be a terrible option. All right. The LA Rams traveling to Dallas to play the Cowboys. Seems like two teams that, from a fantasy aspect, you know who you want to start. I wouldn't put too much faith in the Robert Woods game last week, but, Todd Gurley, you want to get in there. Ezekiel Elliott, you want to get in there. Is there anybody that, you might not be thinking about that you might want to also consider in this one, Kevin?
Not really. I think that I'm curious to see how they follow up with Sammy Watkins in this one. I think that, I liked what we saw out of him last week. Obviously, he gets the 2 touchdowns. He's not going to get 2 touchdowns every week, but I did appreciate the usage. Dallas giving up 23.8 points per game to fantasy or to wide receivers. That's good for the 13th worst in the league. So, I'd like to see if they continue to increase the volume with Sammy Watkins, and you see the chemistry between him and Jared Goff a little bit more. So that's one of the things that I'm watching for in this game. But for the most part, this game's going to be a battle of the running backs, and I can't wait to see it. I think both these guys are going to go off.
I'd just say keep an eye on Watkins' availability, right? Because he was in concussion protocol this week. So make sure you're checking that up to game time.
That's what you got for this one, Sal? Anything else?
Maybe you had a question. You don't have no questions for me?
Cole Beasley. What do you think about Cole Beasley?
You do move the no. Steve, don't give in. He just said that he's the guy that moves the needle, and yet he needs you to ask a question.
Steve usually comes prepared with notes.
I'm just saying, if you move the needle, why don't you ask the question?
Here's the question: why do we still allow Kevin to talk on this podcast? That's a good question.
That is a
Cole
good question.
Cole Beasley to me has been hit or miss this season. He was much more reliable last year as like you're a wide receiver 3 or a flex or a good best ball play. They got Bryce Butler involved last game with some big downfield passes. So let's see if that's the type of offense they're going with this year instead of the little dump-off passes. And they've gotten Zeke more involved in the dump-off game. So that's probably cut into Cole Beasley's value.
Yeah, I can't disagree with that. I will just say before we move on, because this game seems pretty obvious, that Jared Goff, he might be someone that you might want to consider. Kevin talked about Deshaun Kaiser. Dallas has allowed 20-plus points to Trevor Siemian and Carson Palmer this year. So if you are hurting for a quarterback, you might be able to roll with Jared Goff this week and just get some decent fantasy production out of that one. So we will move on to a game that might not have seemed super exciting before the season started, but at this point does seem pretty good. That is the Tennessee Titans at the Houston Texans. Deshaun Watson has looked pretty good so far, but Tennessee has also looked pretty good. And so do you think a ton of points are going to be scored here? How are you feeling about these two quarterbacks? Mariota's got to go against that Houston defense. Watson, rookie, but we've seen the Tennessee defense being torn up basically every single week. So do you think that this is a game where you can try and get a few people in there, or are the quarterbacks the only ones that you want to try and get in these lineups?
So you guys made fun of me last week. It was Carlos Hyde I had as an RB5. He ended up having a good week. You guys made fun of me for having him that high up there. This week, I will absolutely 100% get made fun of for my Deshaun Watson ranking. I have him in the top 12. I have him at 5 right now. That'll come down. I don't know why he's at 5. That's a mistake. But I do have him as a quarterback 1 this week. I think he is a great play this week against the Tennessee Titans. And furthermore, I think with that will come along a great game for DeAndre Hopkins. I think the two of these guys are going to eat. And on top of that, I think you can see Deshaun Watson run around a little bit on these guys as well. I liked what he did against New England. Sal and I talked about a little bit. I think a little bit was driven by the heat and the defense being just gassed, that he was able to run around a little more than he normally would. But he clearly displayed some vision downfield while being able to extend the plays and make things happen with his legs. So I really like Deshaun Watson this week.
I personally think that sometimes Kevin imagines that we make fun of him for stuff. I don't even remember knowing that you had Carlos Hyde at 5. So
it was in our chat. I definitely.
It was on the swim last.
Back me up.
No, I saw. I definitely saw it on the chat.
Week, so.
I remember 10 minutes into the game, Kevin was like, "I had Hyde at 5," because he was like, "This is going to be a good game. I want everyone to know I had him ranked super high."
Oh, so I don't remember seeing that.
Yeah.
So
it was 10 minutes. It was right before the game. It was after his first carry. And then he got hurt, and I got made fun of for
right. We moved off on that already. Kevin, I agree with you on DeAndre Hopkins, and I haven't been the biggest DeAndre Hopkins fan this year, but he is on my swim list this week. And if you look back at his 3 out of his last 4 games against the Tennessee Titans, he's got 7 catches for 117 and a touchdown. He's got 8 catches for 94 and a touchdown. And in week 17 of last year, he had another 7 catches for 123 yards. They've given up 42 receptions, 502 yards, and 5 touchdowns to wide receivers this year. We all know that Hopkins is leading the league in targets. I would imagine he's going to see a ton more again this week, double digits again. So if I have Hopkins, he's absolutely locked into my lineup, and he's somebody I'm probably playing in DFS this week as well. Mariota is another guy who I'm always a little leery, and I guess I got to come around on the rushing quarterbacks more. I'm never really give them their due, and I did have Cam Newton in a lot of places this year, and but Cam, I'm a fan of. My son's a fan of him, so we've been fans of him since he came out of college. But I had a lot of Cam investment this year, and I was asked late to join a 10-team. I guess we'll call it a friends league of some people I grew up with and their extended friends and family. And I have Cam there, and he's been terrible, and he's been terrible. And Mariota was sitting there on the waiver wire, so I scooped up Mariota this week. He's locked and loaded in my lineup, and I expect that it's going to be a good game. I don't know about super high scoring because these are pretty good defenses. But I got to imagine both teams could get up into the 20s. So should be a lot of fun this game, actually, because these are two good young teams that should be fighting for that division title.
Mariota worries me a little bit because of the Houston defense. Obviously, they got lit up a little bit last week, but that's Tom Brady and a little bit of a difference there. Mariota, I'm a little more hesitant on, especially with Corey Davis probably missing this one as well, and then their pass catchers just haven't really stood out to me this year. So I'm a little more down on Mariota.
They get the tight ends. They get the tight ends involved, Kevin, which is good for a young quarterback and. If they're going to play both running backs and both of those guys can catch the ball as well, so it should be a good game. I don't think it'll be
a good game. I agree.
No record breaking numbers.
Yeah, Vegas has the total for that game at 44, so they are not expecting a real shootout there, but we will have to see. In the sake of time, since we are already behind, we are going to move on.
Oh boy, yeah, we knew that was coming.
That's right. We move on.
How I missed that?
The Detroit Lions at the Minnesota Vikings. We talked about a little bit earlier, Sam Bradford. He's been ruled out for this week, so he is not somebody that you're going to be able to put into your lineup. We saw the Lions last week. They almost pulled off that victory against the Falcons. So in this game, can you trust anybody on this Lions offense outside of Matthew Stafford, who's been very solid, although not very electric, and then Golden Tate, who's been his primary target? Who else on this offense can you trust, if anybody, Sal?
Marvin Jones. And you're going to say to me, why Marvin Jones? He's a desperation play. But through the first three games
somewhere.
The Vikings have held number one wide receivers to very modest totals. Michael Thomas, 45 yards. Antonio Brown, 62 yards. And Mike Evans, 67 yards. But the number two wide receiver for the Pittsburgh Steelers, Martavis Bryant, Steve's guy, had 91 yards with a touchdown. And a week ago, Deshaun Jackson had 84 yards and a touchdown. So if I'm looking for a deeper play in wide receiver 3 or a flex, I'm going to give Marvin Jones a shot to get off my bench this week. So I like him. I mean, you're playing Tate if you have him as well, because Tate he's a high-end wide receiver too. He should be in your lineup every week. And I think I'm going to be sitting Abdullah this week. I don't like the prospects of the running game for Detroit this week. And I just think that they're kind of like just going to scrap that running game. It's going to be just a couple plays here and there to keep them honest. But there's not going to be a big, impressive running game in Detroit all year. I think this is Matt Stafford's offense. He looks better than he ever has. And I expect plenty of passing. And Steve, maybe you put Ebron in there just for Steve.
Don't do it. Ebron averaging 4 yards per target. That is the lowest rate for any tight end with double-digit targets. That is also a stat from Rich Rebar, because he just puts out stats all the time. I can't help but write them down when I see them. So, and especially when they're against someone like Eric Ebron, I'm going to take note. Yeah. So, Kevin, the Vikings side of the ball. Sam Bradford out. Case Keenum is in. This Lions defense, they're no pushover. Stephon Diggs, Adam Thielen, you putting them back out there? You rolling them back out no matter what?
Yeah, I think you kind of have to. They're guys that you probably drafted, fairly reasonably high. I mean, you didn't draft Thielen very high, but he's a guy you're probably depending on as a flex in most situations. And I don't think this one should be very different. The Lions have been pretty good against opposing quarterbacks. They're 20th as far as the points scored by opposing quarterbacks in fantasy. So they've been pretty decent. But I think, and we've seen the tale of two cities from Case Keenum, right? He has had one game where he was absolutely dreadful and couldn't get anything done. They couldn't move the ball at all. And then he's been lights out, and he threw for over 300 yards and 3 touchdowns. So it really could go either way. I expect this one to be a little bit more in the middle. I don't have Case Keenum ranked very high, but I think you can still trust Diggs, and I think you can still trust Thielen. I think all those people that see Diggs as a wide receiver, is he 1 right now?
Yep.
Ranked as a top wide receiver. I think anyone that's overpaying for that number 1 wide receiver is going to be in for a disappointment, particularly this week, but also going forward. He's just not going to end there for me. I think he regresses back to the mean there. But and this, but you're going to get him in there this week because I think you have to play him.
All right. Does anyone have anybody else on this game to talk about before we move on?
Dalvin Cook, baby. He's going to be.
You got to talk about him. Get him in there.
Yeah, let's get him in there and get him running. I'd say let him run. That's the way to do it.
Run, Rudolph! I thought it was on mute, guys. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Detroit giving up the 11th most points to fantasy running backs, and I think this will be no different. I think Dalvin Cook has a good game here.
Awesome. Well,
I have him at running back 11.
So does that mean that you will be drafting him in this weekend's contest for the on the draft app?
No, probably not. Mostly because, and I'll tell you why, Steve. Mostly because I am doing mostly head-to-heads these days, and at running back 11, there would be no need for me to draft Dalvin Cook. So I will be hoping to get a Le'Veon Bell and maybe Zeke Elliott in this one, with backups as LaShawn McCoy and Devonta Freeman, because those are my top 4 in running backs.
I would agree. The head-to-heads have been they've been very fun to get into. And the awesome thing about them is that they are recycling each week, meaning that, as soon as Sunday is over, they've got the Monday, Thursday lineups in there that you can go ahead and get in on. And then they've got all different kinds of contests. And like we mentioned on the last one, if something unfortunate were to happen to someone that you may have drafted, there's a likely chance that they're going to refund your entry fee into that contest. So the draft app is doing all kinds of great things. They have gotten so huge during this season. It's been absolutely amazing. I know just about everybody that I talk to is talking about what they're going to do this week with their draft lineup and the players that they are going to pick that they get only. Nobody else gets those players. You're drafting OBJ this week against the Tampa Bay defense that has just allowed a ton of points to wide receivers lately. You are going to be the only one to benefit from that. That is basically my favorite thing about that app, is that you get to keep the player. You get those points only. You don't have to share them with anybody. I don't like sharing, Sal.
You don't like sharing me?
No, I don't like sharing, Sal.
It is kind of awkward.
I'm sorry.
It just got really uncomfortable.
Listen, I'm kind of possessive. I'm kind of possessive, all right?
That comma you put in there, Kevin removed it before you got a chance to use it, so I didn't know. But I like the Dream Team, and you know what I like to do in a Dream Team function is go in there, and they got them for some really cheap prices. I'll do a $1 or $3, and I like to go very contrarian in those because I think that's how you separate yourself in those contests. And I've won about 4 of those already this season, so I like doing that. Nothing for too big of money. When you get into the bigger money, you want to go with some of your more realistic plays, but it's something fun to do. And the draft app really has got huge, as Steve has said. And again, Kevin knows what I'm going to say next. If you're suffering from injuries and you got guys that can't get the job done, you go draft a new team every week. You get a new chance to play. You get a new lease on life, and you don't have to sit here all season complaining that your fantasy season is already over.
So definitely you should get in all these contests. Go to playdraft.com/falafel and donate. With Steve, it's donating. With the rest of us, it's depositing $10, and you get a free entry into a free tournament. So that's playdraft.com/falafel, or you can go on the app in iTunes or the Google Play Store and use promo code falafel when you deposit $10, and you will get a free entry.
I'm sure you meant that as a dig, but you said for Steve it's donating, which means that they would just be giving me the money.
No, for you, you're donating your money to everyone else.
Nah,
because you're just putting it in there and then it's gone.
That's not how I wanted to look at that. Not at all.
Well, hey, Steve, I know we're pressed for time, but you mentioned so many times how much money you were going to win this year. So right now on the draft app at the top, if you go into season long, which is your best ball, it will tell you currently how much money you are in line to actually win.
Yes.
Do you have that open? Do you know what your number is?
I'm looking at it right now. $213 and $50. $213.50.
That's a really weird number.
$213.
So I'm going to tell you this, my friend. I didn't enter as many as you. I'm at $227.10, and I am currently in, I believe, 15. I think I'm placing in 11. So Hopefully, if the season can end soon and I can get my hands on that money, that would be awesome.
Listen, it was a slow start for me. Don't worry about it. We can check back in on this, and I will just say, as if the season ended right now, I think I'd be in the money. So I'm not worried about this. I'm happy about how this
Slow
has started.
build for Steve.
That's right.
Steve's a slow builder. Oh, my dog's checking in.
It was only a matter of time. Can we continue on with the games, please?
We shall. All right. I understand. Kevin's looking at the agenda. He sees we're talking about Carolina and New England next. Yeah.
It's weird.
Interesting. Very, very interesting. Sal, we've talked about Cam Newton. A top 12 quarterback in just 2 of his last 13 games, and a quarterback 17 or worse in 10 of those last 13 games, including all 3 of them this season. When do you give up on Cam Newton?
Yeah, when Kevin asked the question earlier, I guess this is the guy I should have brought up. I haven't dropped him anywhere yet, and I'm going to have to wait a little bit longer, but he's not in my lineups this week. In Falafel, I've switched him for Wentz. In that other league that I was just telling you about, I put in Mariota. He's going to be hitting my bench. He's going to be hitting my bench until I see some consistent, good play from him and from that offense on a whole. So if it's a deeper league, I recommend you hold on to him. If it's a shallow league and there's other good quarterbacks available, even Matthew Berry this week said he's welcome to Dumpsville. So it's definitely getting close.
Ouch. Kevin?
Quarterback 18 for me this week.
All right, so you hate him. That's good.
Yeah.
That's good. The Patriots.
No reason to hate the guy. I mean, he's
Well, yeah, I don't hate him.
No, I don't think it was like personal thing.
He's pretty snappy.
Yeah,
I like that he gives footballs to children. That's nice.
that is nice. That's what we need. All right. Anyway, the Patriots. They've allowed the second most receiving yards to running backs to start the season.
Watch your mouth, Steve.
What?
What? Nothing. Go on.
Anywho, you just acquired Christian McCaffrey in a certain
I
league
did.
of ours
Tiny Dancer.
for basically
Yes.
nothing. And
Very excited about this.
what are you excited about him this weekend?
Seems to be an area of consternation for a lot of people in the league. They're not very happy with me.
Are we looking at stars? Did you say constellations?
Consternation.
Oh, carry on.
Yeah. Anyway.
Big word.
Look, I think Christian McCaffrey is a good play this week because, for one, I think that Cam Newton is a terrible play this week. I think that the Patriots struggle with running backs of this nature. I think McCaffrey can do a lot that the Patriots don't defend well. Their linebacking core has been banged up, particularly with Hightower. I haven't seen whether or not he's playing yet this week, but he is a guy that they need on that field, particularly to cover the middle of the field and the running backs coming out of the backfield. So I like McCaffrey a lot in this one. I have him at RB12 this week, and I think that there is a good chance that he will succeed. Patriots are giving up the most fantasy points to running backs this season. That includes 253 yards and 2 touchdowns through the air.
Awesome.
And I think a lot of that comes from Kareem Hunt's first game, but they have managed to continue to give up. They've given up 50-plus yards to a running back in the following 2 weeks as well, including last week. I thought Lamar Miller might have a nice game, and Foreman gets 65 yards receiving, that was a kick in the giblets. But I expect that the Patriots will slowly come down from that top spot, but they don't have a very good defense this year, Kevin. I mean, they're doing the same thing on the passing side of the ball, so. You could definitely start players against this defense this year and not really, be scared off like you've had to be in the past.
Agreed. I completely agree with you. Their defense has been subpar considering in the secondary, considering the amount of money they spent on Gilmore. You thought, Malcolm Butler was going to continue to improve. Definitely a difficult start for them. Now, obviously, they played Drew Brees and they played, they gave up that ridiculous game to Hunt in the beginning, which obviously padded some of.
Well, don't forget how that vaunted game that Alex Smith put out there.
That's what I was just about to say. If you let me finish the sentence, I was saying.
No, I don't do that.
Hunt, I quit.
All right, sweet. Anyway, we're going to move on to the Jacksonville Jaguars going to New York to face the Jets. Coming off their victory against them.
Wait, he was really done? Oh, I'm sorry, Kevin.
That's all right. Don't worry about it. Anyway, Leonard Fournette, Bilal Powell, Anybody else you are trying to get into your lineup this week? I think we can pretty much move on from this one, eh?
I think you
Yeah,
gotta-
go ahead, Kevin. Buddy, I cut you off last time.
no, go ahead. That's it. I tried to unquit. I quit again. Go ahead.
Oh, wait, you quit? I would have been celebrating. Yeah, I don't know that there's a whole lot of other guys you want to get into your lineup this week from this game. I mean, if I'm starting, if I have to put in a desperation wide receiver, I could look at either Hearns or Marquise Lee. I got Jermaine Curse on my sync list this week. We saw good stuff out of Robbie Anderson last week. We saw Jeremy Curley get involved. So for now, I'm going to take a little break from putting him in there. The Jaguars have given up a league low 19 receptions and 201 yards to wide receivers, and they've only given up one touchdown. So I think that this is a week where I'm not even so thrilled about putting Powell in there, but you probably have to get him in with Forte out of there. He's going to be the focal point.
You know the one thing the Jaguars cannot defend? It's the tight end.
I was going to say tight end.
They've been very bad against the tight end this year. They're the third, giving up the third most fantasy points. That's 11.9 points per game. 17 receptions, 177 yards, and 2 touchdowns. So, interestingly enough, in this, I think Austin Seferian-Jenkins is a guy that I want to keep an eye on. They've said he's looked good. He got his first start last week. I think that this is a game that they could really try to use him. Assuming that they're not down by a lot, and I don't expect Jacksonville to really blow them out the way they did Baltimore last week. So,
But you're not starting him.
ASJ?
Yeah.
In tight end?
No.
I could,
Where?
depending on your other options.
20-team league?
20.
Where do you got him ranked?
I have him at. I don't want to talk about it.
Okay.
He's too low in my rankings. I will move
So
him
you're
up.
not, like you said, you're keeping an eye on him because he tied the team lead in targets last week. He had 6, which was as much as any wide receiver had. So I understand, but you're not starting him this week. You're not just throwing him in there.
Here's the thing about the tight end position that I think outside of maybe the top 10, and those include guys that are banged up like Jordan Reed and Jimmy Graham, and even though those guys may or may not play this week, Jack Doyle's hurt. The thing about the tight end position is when it comes to the rankings, I stat out my rankings. I've talked about this before, and the stats actually end up coming out. The points come out very similar, right? The separation between the tight end position is very, very small.
True.
So while he may be further down in my rankings, if there's a guy that I'm not 100% confident about this week, I may throw him out there because there's a chance that he gets a touchdown and another guy doesn't. And when you're talking about the tight end position, that's really what it is, right? Most of those guys outside of the top ones are touchdown dependent.
I think the place to get Jenkins in this week is in DFS.
Yeah.
Because he's really cheap and he's that great contrarian play and he's a guy that'll have low ownership. So if you want to make up a couple different rosters or a couple different lineups, rather, and get him in on one of them or even on a couple of them because that is definitely where he could pay off big.
All right, we are so far behind. We're moving on. The San Francisco 49ers are traveling to play the Arizona Cardinals. Carson Palmer looked pretty good last week, Kevin, but in his last 5 games against the 49ers, he is averaging 332 yards, which is great, but only 7 touchdowns, and in that span, he's finished higher than a QB 14 only 1 time. Are you putting him in your lineup just thinking that he is going to be rolling this week?
I mean, it really depends on the league size and everything. I don't think he's in my top 12, but I do think the Arizona Cardinals are struggling against quarterbacks this year. They're in the top 10 as far as fantasy points given up. I think they're at they've given up the 7th most fantasy points to quarterbacks. So I think you can play him if you have to. And actually, I lied. He's number 10 for me. So yeah, I'm playing him.
Liar.
Yeah.
Liar.
Yeah, play Carson Palmer. Do it.
Right.
Do it.
Do it. Bacardi and Cola, do it. Sal, Pierre Garçon. He had a huge game last week in the shootout on Thursday Night Football, although he is probably going to be faced up against Patrick Peterson for the majority of this matchup. Are you fading him this week? Do you think he's someone everybody should avoid?
Yeah, I guess it depends on your roster construction and how deep of a league it is. But in shallow leagues, 10-team leagues, 12-team leagues, you could probably find someone else this week who's a better play. I'm going to have him in there in some of my deeper spots, but I like the fact that he's taken on the role that we thought he would. He's clearly the guy that Hoyer's looking for when it comes to wide receivers. I mean, this is Hyde's offense first and foremost, but I maybe look a little deeper than Mr. Cosson this week.
So you know what's interesting about the Cardinals is they've given up 509 yards and 5 touchdowns to opposing wide receivers in this one, yet only 36 receptions. So they're giving up a lot of big chunk plays. Now, that's not particularly Garcon's strong point, but we did see him have a couple of big plays, and really there's not a lot of other guys in that offense that they're going to throw the ball to regularly enough to worry about. So I could see Garcon being a decent sneaky play in this one, and I throw him in there for sure. I think I'll have him as a wide receiver too. So
yeah,
he's back in my lineup.
He is pretty much the only wide receiver option on that team, and then Larry Fitzgerald, I think, is the only safe option for the Arizona Cardinals. John Brown has been practicing so far this week. He looks like he's trending in the right direction. I would probably wait a week to get him in my lineup, and everybody else, J.J. Nelson, Jerome Brown, you're shooting at straws with that. You're not going to be able to know which one of those guys is going to have the big game, so I would probably avoid both of them this week. All right, we're going to move on. The Philadelphia Eagles, Carson Wentz's team, Sal's lover boy so far this season. They are traveling.
Whoa! Don't spread rumors.
Hey, it's not a rumor. All right.
I thought he was holding Adrian Peterson.
Menage a trois.
I get around.
Whoa! Oh, righty then.
Anyway, the Philadelphia Eagles, as I was trying to say, visiting the LA Chargers. I expect a lot of offense out of this one. I like a lot of people in this game. Darren Sproles out for the year with his torn ACL and broken arm. Is Wendell Smallwood the guy that you'd be getting in there, or are you fading this Eagles backfield completely, Sal?
I think I got to wait to see how this plays out. Right? Wendell Smallwood has not been consistent enough when given an opportunity for me to just be like, oh, he's the guy I'm plugging him in. He's my RB2. I think they're going to both be involved, him and Blunt, fairly equally. Smallwood more of a pass catching guy and third down back guy, and of course Blunt has the goal line touches. So there's one particular league out there, 14-team single season auction, where I'll be playing both of them this week, but that's just because of poor roster construction. But yeah, there should be other guys in 10 or 12 team leagues that you could start without having to look in Wendell Smallwood's direction.
See, I disagree. I do think Smallwood is going to be the guy. I think that you can start him fairly comfortably in this one because I think he's going to get the majority of the volume. I think LeGarrette Blount obviously has his role, short yardage, goal line, so he's got a good touchdown upside, but he's not going to be used in the passing game. We talked about how little he catches the ball in his career. It's just not his strong suit. So personally, I expect Smallwood to get a lot of work. We saw what Darren Sproles was able to do in this offense with the volume of passes that he can catch. And I think, I don't think Smallwood's as good in that area as Sproles is, but Sproles is very good. And I think Smallwood will be just good enough. I have him as an RB2 this week, and I would play him pretty comfortably.
I will just add on there at the end, Zach Ertz is somebody that I would not even consider benching after the start that he's had. You might be worried seeing what San Diego or Los Angeles, Jesus, I do that every time. What Los Angeles did to Travis Kelce last week. I don't think you sit Ertz. Those tight end games happened. I don't think this is going to happen to him. He has 28 targets on the season so far, so you get him in your lineup. He has been a PPR monster so far. Big fan of Zach Ertz. All right, we're going to move on unless
Steve has
Ertz
Zach.
plays.
Whoa. Steve has Zach Ertz as the number 1 tight end this week. I just want to make sure we all know that.
Yep.
He's probably not he's probably not alone on that, but
No, I'm
Ertz
sure
is you play him every week now. There's no question about Zach Ertz. Yeah. He's made it, especially with some of the guys that are out with injuries or guys that are banged up and may or may not play or may not make. You put him in every week. I think that's no longer a question.
A year
So
late.
I know Sal's answer on this, but I did get a question today from one of our listeners about Carson Wentz. He has Carson Wentz as his only quarterback outside of Andrew Luck, and he's been waiting on Luck. The question I got was, should he drop Luck? Obviously, it's a one quarterback league, but should he drop Luck and just roll with Wentz the rest of the season? I know Sal's going to say yes for sure. What would you say, Steve?
I mean, if you have to drop him, you're not going to get Luck back until November. So you can drop him now, put someone else on your lineup that you might feel a little more comfortable with, and then, a few weeks before, you keep an eye on the news. You might be able to pick Luck back up, drop somebody else that might not be performing for you. But yeah, I'm not holding him in leagues that I don't have an IR spot to stash him in. I'm not holding him on my lineups, and obviously unless it's a dynasty. I wasn't listening to you. Sorry, keeping with the theme of the show. So
yeah, no, it was definitely not a dynasty single quarterback redraft league. I guess the one thing I gave similar advice except that I said keep him in my roster unless you have to drop him for someone else.
Yeah.
Sounded like he had a pretty sturdy roster elsewhere, so he didn't need to be dropping him for anyone. So I think that this is I think it was a good time to hold him as if he could, and I think you can roll with Wentz, and then you have two startable options when Luck does come back. So I recommended holding unless you absolutely need the roster spot. So thanks to our good friend M. Fossey. I know you guys call him M. Fazy, but good thanks to him for shouting that question out to me.
booyah. Sounds good. I hope we've confused him enough with our alternating answers. That was great. I'm sure he feels
Did you just say booyah?
Yeah, booyah. You don't say that ever? No.
No.
Yeah, you're not cool. So, anyway, we're going to move on to the New York Giants traveling to Tampa Bay to play the Buccaneers. Tampa Bay allowing 16.5 receptions per game to their opposing wide receivers. That is the highest rate in the league. OBJ, were you worried about him? Get him in your lineup. That is an obvious, as Sal would say, no-brainer. Every single week, he's healthy, you play him. But what about Sterling Shepard or Brandon Marshall, Sal? Which one of those guys are you going with this week?
I mean, it looks like your Binky is back in prime time, right? He's been the talk of the town. He's got 2 touchdowns. He had a huge touchdown last week. I have Eli Manning back on the swim list this week, and Eli threw for 369. Yeah, well, in a 7-minute period in the last week's fourth quarter, we saw an absolute explosion when this Giants offense was hitting on all cylinders. Everybody's back and healthy. Brandon Marshall looks a little bit more confident. Sterling Shepard's still heavily involved. They got Evan Ingram there to hold people off over the middle. I think that this is a very good week to get Giants in your lineup. Now, don't start Sterling Shepard over a guy like, say, Golden Tate, who you would normally have in there. But I'm saying if you got a wide receiver 3 slot available or multiple flexes, Brandon Marshall and Sterling Shepard are guys you could consider. But I think I'm starting Eli this week. Where do you guys, since I didn't do my rankings this week because on Tuesday I went and enjoyed myself at the Matthew Berry live show in Manhattan, and that screwed me up all week. Where do you guys have Eli Manning ranked this week?
I can tell you right now that neither of us have him as a starting quarterback in most formats. I have him at QB 21. Steve has him at QB 24.
Yep.
All right, so we should definitely do some kind of a bet on this. I'm going to tell you that he will have a top 12 finish this week.
I'll take 13 and lower.
Okay.
I'll take it.
All right, what's the bet? What are you guys betting?
We'll have to come up with. I'll think about and try and come up with something before the end of the show.
Is it a shirt with Steve's face on it?
Yeah.
Ooh,
When's
nobody
that bet
wants
coming? You guys already have a bet with that. I'm sorry, you've already agreed to that.
Sometimes I'm not sure if Steve realizes we're making a joke, and he thinks we forgot about certain things.
I think he's already ordered several shirts with his film
Listen,
face on them.
I'm not going to get refunded for these, and they need to be distributed.
That's right. That's right. That's exactly what I thought.
All right. We're going to move on unless you guys have anything to say about the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Jaquiz Rodgers, you going to get him in there?
Yeah,
No?
I guess.
What about this? The Giants are allowing 153 rushing yards per game, the worst in the league.
Yeah, I'm gonna probably play Jacquizz Rodgers, I guess. I don't know.
You don't sound happy.
I don't-
Hey, the
like-
Giant. Well, we all tried to talk at the same time, and then none of us talked.
Whoa.
Yeah, it was bad.
I'll tell you what else the Giants do. They've given up at least one touchdown, or they've given up one touchdown to a tight end in all 3 games this year. So depending on if you're Steve or Kevin, you're going to start either O.J. Howard or Cameron Brate.
Kevin doesn't believe
So
that
it depends
anymore.
on what side of the.
No, I don't think you're going to start either of them because I think they're going to cancel each other out. That's been my point. Apparently,
One of
you don't
those two
at all.
guys is going to score a touchdown this week.
Cameron Brate.
Pick the right one.
Cameron
Go.
Brate. It'll be him. Sweet.
Are you sure?
Yep. All right, we're moving on to the Oakland Raiders.
You want to have a bet?
At
How
the
about we?
Denver
How
Broncos.
about we make a bet on Cameron Brate versus O.J. Howard this week?
Done.
All right. What's the bet?
Cameron Brate will be better.
Yeah. Thanks.
What else do you need?
These bets suck, and we should move
Oh
on.
my
Yeah,
god.
let's just keep going.
Oh goodness. All right, Sal, what do you got? Oakland Raiders at the Denver Broncos. Do you think this is the week where the Oakland Raiders start to play offense?
I'm sorry. I saw 2 weeks ago they scored a ton of points in that vaunted Jet defense. What are you talking about?
Yeah, the Jets.
No, this game worries me. Denver has shut down good running backs in back-to-back weeks, and now Marshawn Lynch has to go up in there and face them. So I'm not thrilled with Marshawn Lynch as a starting running back this week. And Derek Carr has found himself on my sink list for this week. And Derek, the place to beat the Broncos this year has been through the air. They've given up 7 touchdowns to quarterbacks, but Derek Carr has played them 5 times, and he's been miserable in those 5 starts. He's gone over 200 yards passing once. He's thrown for only 6 touchdowns in 5 games while turning the ball over 9 times and 5 fumbles in games against Denver. So I'm sure they're going to throw. I'm sure they're going to throw plenty, and you might get a decent game out of one of the 2 wide receivers. Pick which one. Who the hell knows at this point? But there's that chance for the turnovers. It's going to make me want to put Derek Carr on my bench. That's another good question. Where do you guys have Derek Carr ranked
I
this
was
week?
just going to ask you, Sal, before we get to that, would you play Derek Carr or Eli Manning? Sorry.
Not Eli Rogers. I would play Eli Manning over Derek Carr this week.
So would I. I actually have Eli Manning 1 spot ahead of Derek Carr this week.
I don't.
No, you have Derek Carr at 11, so you're still okay with Derek Carr this week. Apparently, you do not think much of your Denver defense.
I'm still putting him in there because I think he's going to have to throw to win the game. Like Sal said, they've been beat this year, if they've been beat at all, which it was only one time last week. Just saying, is
They
through
played
the
3
air.
games.
I understand. I get
Yeah,
it.
I get that, but I'm not sure that I agree with that. I mean, you look at who they played, right? Who's been on their schedule so far?
San Diego, Dallas, and Buffalo.
Okay, so you're talking about 3 teams with 3 of the best running backs in the league,
Which they've
So
held
their
to
game-
59.7 yards per game.
Would you please let me finish?
Nah.
So their game plan has been to shut down the strength of those offenses. The strength of the Oakland offense is their air game. So I would imagine they are going to put more pressure on Derek Carr, put more pressure on the secondary to shut down the passing game, and try to let Marshawn Lynch beat them because it is not their strength. So in my mind, I think it's going to be the opposite this week. I think Denver's defense is good enough to be versatile like that.
I think Denver's defense doesn't have to game plan for any necessarily one specific thing. I think that they have the talent at each
Everyone
position.
game plan. Every
Well,
team game
I
plan.
understand
That's what they
that.
do.
I understand that, but it's not like San Diego doesn't have good receivers. It's not like Dallas doesn't have, Des Bryant and Jason Witten, who did score a touchdown. But the offenses have been solid. Buffalo, their offense is questionable, but they did have LaShawn McCoy, and they held him in check as well.
I'm just saying. So let's do this, right? Who's the number one offensive weapon on San Diego?
Melvin Gordon.
Okay. Who's the number one offensive weapon on the Dallas Cowboys?
Ezekiel Elliott.
And who's the number one offensive weapon on the Buffalo Bills?
Charles Clay.
Yeah, so as a defense, don't you think you would work on shutting down LaShawn McCoy, Melvin Gordon, and Ezekiel Elliott and try to let the teams throw?
I understand.
I'm just saying.
I understand that
you're gonna play against the strengths. That's all. We got to move on.
Yeah, absolutely. We do. We're going to move on to this thriller of a Sunday night football game. The Indianapolis Colts traveling to the 12th man in Seattle, the Seattle Seahawks, coming off a loss in Tennessee. Do we need to talk about this game?
No, start everybody on Seattle, bench everybody in Indianapolis. This game is going to be a goddamn blowout.
Yeah, I agree with that, and I will just say there's a lot of people that are worried about this Seattle offense, and I think this is the one where you're going to stop worrying about. So don't get cute. Do what Sal says. Start all your Seahawks because they are going to score, and they're going to score a lot.
All right.
The one guy I put in, I think I put T.Y. Hilton in.
I would
for Indy. I think I play him.
Yeah, I would expect lesser numbers than you got last week, but I still think you're going to play him for sure.
All right, I would. That's it. We're done. We don't need to talk about this game anymore. I don't want to talk about it.
All right. So apparently Sal's dog is going to give us his final thoughts, and then Steve's going to get to his.
Do you believe that my dog is outside right now? He's on the other side of the door. That loud son of a monkey. My finishing thoughts. I get to go first for the first time ever.
No,
that's not what he said.
No, I actually said your dog and then Steve.
You're actually third tonight.
All right, Smorsy, come on. The boys want to talk to you. Come on in, buddy.
All right, thank you guys for listening to this episode of the Falafel House Fantasy Football Podcast. You can check us out on Twitter. You can check out Falafel House on Instagram and on Facebook. And go to falafelhouse.com. We've got our rankings out now. We're going to have a betting article coming out later this weekend. And I would be a terrible person if I didn't say happy birthday to Tucker, my son, 4 years old today. I am ignoring him on his birthday to record this podcast, so the least I could do is say happy birthday. I love you, buddy. And Sal, on to you.
Super awesome. Happy birthday to Tucker. He is a funny little dude. He gets on our chats every once in a while in the Boxer chat. And he's really, really awesome. Both of you guys have great kids. Kevin's kid is starting to talk now. This is crazy.
Thank you to
I don't
Baby
know if she even
Falafel.
born when we first. This is crazy. You know they're getting bigger, and I'm so happy for you guys. So my finishing thought is, hey, love your children, be good to your children, and get off the podcast and go pay attention to them. Kevin, you're up.
All right, thank you, and happy birthday to Tucker from the entire Cotillo family. We definitely do appreciate the joy that he brings to the chat from time to time, especially when he calls out Sal. That's my my favorite part.
He bullies me. He definitely bullies me.
He does. Not as much as he bullies Steve, but you know, it's still nice to hear.
That's a fact.
So I just want to remind everyone to add a charitable aspect to your fantasy experience, whether it's donating to fantasycares.net when those leagues are up and running again, or to just donating a one of your league fees or whatever you decide to do, get together as a league and do something for charity. Whatever you want to do, just add something to it. We will enhance your experience. I promise you that. We will be back on Sunday night to review the games. I think all three of us will be there again.
Yep.
And until that time, Steve, hit the button.